Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the compiling author of the collectively written book Roar, True Tales of Women Warriors, and she is also a co-founder of the Pathfinders Collective, which has had 3 anthology books published. Bold, Stories About Living Life Out Loud, Escape, Stories About Breaking Free, and Clarity, Stories About the Moment That Changed It All. Her name is Erin Rodgers, not to be confused with a certain NFL player whose given name is spelled differently. And here's my interview with Erin. Erin Rodgers, that's spelled E-R-I-N, not to be confused with the controversial football player whose first name is spelled much differently. Welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a bit of a journey the last few years with that name.
How did you come to find out that you had autism and ADHD in your 30s?
Well, the ADHD, basically at one point, I believe I read an article and I was like, oh, that really sounds like me. And then I talked to friends of mine who were like, oh, you mean like you're going to deal with it now? And I went, I'm sorry, what? And they were like, oh, well, we figured you got tested years ago and you just didn't want to didn't want to identify that way or something like that. We just figured you'd come to it in time. Like, no, that is not true. I had no idea, but there we go. So having supportive friends is wonderful, but sometimes can be confusing. So I figured that out, and then I got diagnosed with that. Autism. I have not been medically diagnosed. That was another thing where I was like, huh, this also, there seems like another piece of the puzzle missing. Puzzle and autism is perhaps not the metaphor I wanted to go with, thinking of Autism Speaks, but we'll just put that to the side. Anyways, there seemed to be another piece of the puzzle, and the more I looked into it, especially autism, how it often comes about with women, I was like, oh. It really, like, the two of them coming together, it really made everything make sense, because I was like, even when I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, I was like, well, there's this part that doesn't make sense, and then there's this part that doesn't make sense. And I just didn't know that you could have both. Like, I didn't realize. It's weird because I love a combo platter, but I had no idea my brain could have one.
Feel free to tell our listeners more about yourself.
Sure. I am a writer and storytelling coach from Toronto, Canada. I have performed for years. I started out in stand-up. I've done sketch, I've done improv, and then one day, someone who was in my improv troupe was in a storytelling show, and I decided to go. I wanted to be a good supportive friend, so I went to her show, and I was sitting in the back, kind of figuring, I'd see her, and then I'd leave because I wasn't sure about this whole storytelling thing. I was like, this sounds weird. And I had, my jacket over one shoulder ready to leave. And then the first person went up and started telling their story. And I laughed and I cried. And it was like what people talk about with love is at first sight, where I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is it for me. And so I started running a show called Awkward, where people told embarrassing stories. And I was working with people. And then I realized I was very good at that. I was very good at coaching people and helping them find their story and, like, find funny moments or more emotional moments and shape them. And so that's the career I started following. Sort of like the Pied Piper. It started leading me away to this whole other world. And so now, I've always been earnest, but I'm much less afraid to be, which I feel like is partly the storytelling world and partly just accepting my own neurodiversity. In fact, I think storytelling and my discovery of my neurodiversity probably went pretty hand in hand, because storytelling taught me to accept myself, and that everyone has a story and that everyone is unique, and that's beautiful. And that really opened up my eyes to the fact that, like, it was okay to just accept myself exactly how I am and to not spend so much time masking. And for years, I don't, if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have told you I masked, but I would have had some idea of how much energy I was putting in to trying to seem like other people, and fit in and not embarrass myself and not push people away. And now I realize so much of what I was doing was pushing people away, because nobody knew who I really was.
And I'm going to explain a term you used
Mm,
that a lot of our listeners may not fully understand.
mm,
When you talked about masking, you're referring to an autistic or other neurodivergent person who tries to present as a normal person without any kind of developmental disorder. I have an autism spectrum disorder. I was diagnosed as a child, and
mm.
I'm pretty much incapable of masking.
Yeah. I will say, um, one of the things I find fascinating, is just different experiences and how they tie in with neurodiversity. So, for example, most of the women I know who are autistic, because I'm lucky enough to now know more and more autistic people, were diagnosed as adults. And also, we're better isn't the word, but we're much more encouraged to mask. And some of our behaviors, it's like, oh, well, that's just being a girl or blah, 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 blah. So I find a lot of I have yet to meet a woman, and that's not a criticism, that is like, I'm incapable of masking, because you don't really necessarily get a choice if you're socialized as a woman, I find. Like, there's not, hopefully it's getting better now, but there's not this, there's like a lot of really difficult ideas around boys will be boys, but at least in my experience, there's a little bit more space with young men than there are with young women. Like, a boy can be loud and a girl can't necessarily, at least when I was a child. So it's not that like it's easier for men, because it's not easy for anyone to be autistic, or like a non-binary person, or etc. But I do find it really interesting how stuff like gender and socialization changes the way people present themselves and their autism.
One of the story collections you've been a contributing author for is Roar True Tales of Women Warriors. Without
Hmm.
spoiling too much of that collection, what is the overarching theme of it, and what are the stories about?
Well, I can mostly speak to my own, because apparently I'm obsessed with myself. But they're all stories about women finding their power in many different ways. Mine is about finding my own queerness, because let me tell you, many things are things that I discovered as an adult. And uh, I feel like my queerness is another thing where like everybody knew, but they didn't want to put pressure on me. So that's what that story is about, me discovering that about myself, and how freeing that is, to discover an important part of yourself. I know there's a lot of different people, different women, talking about different ways that they found their power, they found their strength, and they found their authentic self.
You co founded the Pathfinders Collective, which has published three anthologies a year
Mm-hmm.
apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Bold, stories about living life out loud; Escape, stories about breaking free; and Clarity, stories about the moment that changed it all.
Mm-hmm.
Without spoiling too much of each anthology, what is each anthology about?
Well, oddly enough, I would say each anthology is, while the theme is different, it each of them is about people taking a chance and being willing to be their authentic selves and learning something about themselves. And so sometimes it's life happens and you kind of can't help. The same way you were saying, I can't mask. There's people where a life change happens and you can't help but change. And then there's people that decide to do something different. But all of them, to my mind, are about people making some sort of active decision. Because even if something happens and it's like, oh, I have no other choice, there's some sort of choice involved. You choose how you react and you choose exactly what path you go on. But it's about people making a choice, being their authentic self, learning and growing. I think really the shared theme and everything is change. That's what it is. And that's what I love about storytelling, is because I'm so sorry about that beep. When I hear a story about change, and I know it's like a regular person like me, if they can change, I can change too.
What is it like to curate and produce collections of stories so they can be published as anthology books? And what have you learned by curating and producing the collections?
Great question. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful experience, truly. It is one of those things where when I got in touch with my co-founder Jeremy, because I basically this is one of the things where people are like, "Oh yeah, my autism is a superpower," or "Oh, my autism is like so, it makes my life worse." Um, I don't find it's a superpower. It hasn't ruined my life, but it's definitely shaped it. And I think part of that is just me being like, what if I had this idea and I just put it out there and I like took this risk in a way that doesn't necessarily seem to make sense. So with Jeremy, I got in touch with him and I was like, we started becoming friends. I met him at a show, and then I pitched him this idea that was going to be a whole lot of work. Um, and I can speak for both of us when I say it's been really beautiful. We've learned so much about stories and how to write them and how to coach people. Like my own skills in that have improved greatly. And I feel like I was never the Grinch, but if like the Grinch started as like pretty okay, my heart still grew 3 sizes. So it's been so inspiring. I've learned so much. Everyone that I work with, I learn something from, partly the way they look at the world, partly the way they approach their stories. People ask interesting questions that inspire me to like look at the way I do things more closely. It's just really fascinating and inspiring and beautiful. Um, and then what I've learned with the self-publishing aspect of it, I think that was the second part of the question. Am I right?
Uh, yes, I didn't ask it yet. How were each of the books you've contributed to published?
Yes. So we self-publish them. All the money goes to charity. This time it's Planned Parenthood. And yeah, we just decided we wanted to put it out ourselves. We knew we were starting to meet all these people. From COVID, there was all these online shows, and we had started to meet people from all around the world. So we wanted to have a chance to kind of have control of what was happening and also do it at our own pace and our own way. So we self-published it. Them.
Now, I'm going to ask a question about women's reproductive health care in the United States. That's become a very political topic. Well, it has been a very political topic for
Yeah.
many decades because
Yeah, sure has.
the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a 49-year precedent a couple of
Yeah.
years ago uh, that made abortion legal in every state. And now you got a patchwork of laws regarding abortion and reproductive health care. And you had the one state, Alabama, try to ban IVF, and then there was a ton of public opposition to that. But how does women's reproductive health care work differently in Canada than the United States?
Well, I mean, we're abortions are legal. There has been in our provinces, there's differences. I will say I'm unfortunately not an expert in uh this topic, but our freedom of women's reproductive health, at least right now, is freer and more open. I genuinely worry about it, especially because in Canada, our neighbors to the south, that tends to reflect on our own politics and change our politics significantly. One of our former prime ministers. Wow, America is influencing me as I speak. One of our former prime ministers, Pierre Trudeau, once said that Canada and America, it's like being in bed with an elephant. It's fine until it turns over. So you have to really be aware of what's happening over there. Also, as a queer person, I want to make sure I know with Planned Parenthood here, and for a lot of my friends in the States, it's not just that there is access to healthcare. It's the actual thing. It's also how that healthcare is being given and received. And I know for some friends of mine, they've gone to Planned Parenthood because Planned Parenthood uses their proper pronouns and has an understanding of gender diversity. And that's also an important piece to me. So we have a long way to go in Canada for that. And we also have a long way to go with women of color. There's in both of our countries, there's a lot of problems with just equality in healthcare for women. And that's awful and just inexcusable, and it needs to be better.
Now, as you're a storytelling coach, what is a storytelling coach, and how does storytelling coaching work?
Well, it kind of depends. How storytelling coaching works sort of depends on the person you're working with, to be honest, and what their needs are as a storytelling coach. So what I do is help people find and shape their stories. So everyone's going through their life, you have lots of experiences, and taking those experiences and shaping them into stories can feel very overwhelming to people. I regularly have people say things like, "Oh, I don't have any stories. I don't have anything to talk about. I haven't done anything interesting. My life's boring." All those things that are like resistance telling people that they're not enough. And my job is to ask some questions and find those moments of change, is what I call it. That moment where you went from one thing to another, one belief system, one identity, you just change in your life and help people find the emotional truth in those moments. One of the things that is a regular part of my job is letting people know that it doesn't have to be the funniest thing in the world. It doesn't have to be the most exciting thing in the world. It just has to be true. If it's got emotional truth to it, it's going to really connect with an audience. And so my job, I would say at its center, is helping people find those stories and deeply connect to the emotional truth so they can, when they share that story, that emotional truth will deeply connect them to the audience.
How can one use storytelling to make friends and connect with people?
That's a great question. I would say that one of the best parts about storytelling is it really encourages you to be yourself. So I found some wonderful friends in the community because when you're sharing your authentic self, it's easier, one, for people to really know who you are, two, just for people to feel safe. So I would say one of them is going into the storytelling community. I've met so many wonderful people. Two, uh sharing yourself, being authentic, being willing to be vulnerable. But I will give this little one caveat: being vulnerable with stuff that you've processed. So if you're still dealing with that, if talking about it makes you like nonstop cry or something like that, that's not time for it to be a story to share with others. Um, but I also think one of the things about storytelling, at least from a coach's perspective, is encouraging other people to share their stories. So when you meet someone, asking them questions, like a storytelling coach would, which is if they say something about like, oh, I work at a bank. It's like, oh, well, what's your favorite part of your job? And like positive question asking is a great way to make friends. Because people love sharing their stories and they love feeling safe enough to do so. So if you can give them a space to do that, I can't guarantee that they are going to be your friend, but I will say it is much more likely you're going to find your friend group, or you're going to find someone to be in your life in various different ways if you share your authentic self through stories, but also ask people to share theirs. You don't have to say like, "Hey, do you have a story to tell me?" But if they say something about themselves sort of in a friendly way, almost like you're already friends. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, well, what do you like about that?" Or "What's your favorite thing?" Or, you know, what did you do recently, or what were you doing before you got here? Those kind of friendly questions that elicit stories are a great way to make friends and connections.
My final question: do you have any tips or advice for people who get anxious presenting or speaking in public?
Oh, definitely. One of my biggest ones is to set up a plan that is most likely to set you up for success. So, what makes you feel good? Uh, if you like to go on a walk outside, if that calms you down, put that into your schedule. Like, actually, before you're about to go to do a talk, and this is, not everyone can control that much of their schedule, but if it is, what makes me feel really good is walking in the forest, and you can listen to forest sounds quietly by yourself for 2 minutes before you do your presentation. That will be really, really helpful. Um, and like have water there, all that sort of thing. Now, a lot of people will say, picture the audience in their underwear. I don't feel comfortable doing that. One, I feel like I get too like, oh, I wonder what kind of, would they wear fancy underwear? But like I get to, and it also feels weirdly creepy to be picturing strangers in their underwear without their consent. Uh as a this is one of my autism things where it's like, well, that feels like it's against the rules, so I can't do it. It doesn't feel right. Um I like to picture that all the people in that audience are friends of mine and they want me to do well. Because the thing is like nobody goes into a presentation thinking like, man, I hope this person really bombs because I love when people are uncomfortable. So just picture that they're like happy to see you. They're excited. Maybe it's like, who's the person that you are the most comfortable with in the world? And picture them there. And I find that really, really helpful because that kind of person, if I stumble a bit, they're going to do something like, it's okay, buddy. And I know I can just, go back to my last idea and continue. And that kind of energy, it really like people find it charming when you just feel comfortable. Uh Now I realize for some people, because I feel like if this was a couple years and I was listening to that advice, I'd be like, oh, that's really cute. But what if I can't do that? It's just as much as you can picture people on your side, because once you bring that energy to the back of your brain, it's going to start to happen. And also give yourself a break. Like if you do a presentation or a story or whatever and it doesn't do that well, that's one time. That's fine. Everybody makes mistakes. Even here's a real Canadian reference for you. Even Wayne Gretzky didn't shoot a goal every time. And he was Wayne Gretzky. Like, you're not Wayne Gretzky. You're just a person. Unless this is Wayne Gretzky listening. And if so, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. We should be friends. But anyways, yeah, nobody's perfect all the time. Give yourself some grace. Take a deep breath. And also, when you're presenting, if you lose your place, because that's always people's greatest fear. What if I go blank? There's a writer and performer, storyteller in Toronto, Sage Turtle, and she often talks about she was doing like an audition and she went blank and she just looked off into the light until she got her words back. And afterwards, people were like, oh, that was so powerful. I liked how you let whatever the thing you were just saying land with us. How powerful and beautiful. If you don't apologize, if you take a second, because I'm a Canadian, we love to apologize. But when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I messed it up. Oh no, I can't like you get yourself into a spiral. So taking a moment, taking a deep breath, and then going, even if you lose your place, you can just start saying something else. It's going to come back. Have patience with yourself. That's going to be much more powerful than, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Oh, wait, I'll figure it out, etc. Just give yourself a beat and then keep going. They're there to see you. They're on your side.
Erin, you were an amazing guest, and I thank you
Aw,
for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
thank you. This has been such a pleasure.
It was wonderful to interview Erin about the books she's been involved in the creation of, as well as the importance of storytelling. This is Erin Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at camperinapollo.witsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Erin Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.